Welcome again to Bleeding Edge Interviews. Super Dave here, continuing my transition to video land. And today I have for you my interview with Randy George of the Neal Morse Band. They have a new live album out, and he has a new solo album coming out very soon. So he and I are going to talk about those for a little bit, and he's going to share some of the wisdom that you can only get from a veteran performer in the music business. So here we go. Thank you for joining me today, sir. I appreciate your time, and thank you for talking to me.
Sure.
Got some big things in the works, as I see going on here, and as I've heard. Obviously, the biggest thing, the most prominent thing right at the moment is you with the Neal Morse Band have just released a new live album, An Evening of Innocence and Danger, live in Hamburg. That came out the 14th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah. I believe so.
I imagine that's making a big splash. I've listened to it myself, and you guys sound amazing, as you usually do live. But in particular, I think that really captured a good evening on your part.
Good, yeah. Well, we like playing in that venue. We always play there every time in Hamburg. There, the Market Hall. So I guess they call it the Markthalle, but the Market Hall is kind of what it translates to. I imagine you could actually have a market there. It looks like it's set up for vendors and stuff. But
Right.
it's a unique venue. It's got that horseshoe lighting truss. Only place that I've ever has one. But yeah, we didn't film this on video. I don't think there was an intent, at least at the time of doing that show. There was no particular intent to use that show as the official release. We certainly didn't have any video. We couldn't even find good photographs. Yeah,
Wow.
But somehow, I think Neal, I'm not sure what Neal did to determine that we should release Hamburg, because we multi-track all the shows.
Right.
So he probably listened to a number of them and felt like either that or it was just remembering that it was a really good show. But once we got him and listened to it, and it's like, yeah, this was a good show, and we had a really good time, and so it was a good choice. And a lot of people think, well, is there going to be a DVD? And it's like, no, we did not film it. As a matter of fact, the record label asked us to just do a live CD. They didn't want another DVD.
Right.
This time around. We have the one from Morse Fest, so
Right.
we have good video documentation of this particular show.
Yeah. That's interesting. Is that because I always wondered, what went into planning a live album? But I guess in this day and age, is it common practice for people to live track all the albums as you were talking, or all the live performances as you were talking about, and just pick the best one? Or do people tend to say, okay, we're going to record tonight's show, and they plan that in advance? Or is it a kind of a mix of approaches?
Well, if you're just talking about audio, most likely, most bands probably record, all the shows as they can. Technology really easy. You're not really bringing. It used to be you had to bring a 24-track machine, tape machine, and Teamsters and trucks and the whole works. Now you just need a laptop. all these boards have interfaces, so you can take every channel to a track and record it as you're doing the show and mixing it, and it's all you're just using up hard drive space. So yeah, I think a lot of bands probably do that. A lot of guys have gotten into the practice of actually releasing every show that is good.
Yeah.
And even if it's not a frontline release, usually maybe it's a fan club release. But yeah, I think the practice has probably gotten pretty common for most bands who are technologically aware and have some support.
Yeah, that's funny. It hadn't even occurred to me with the portability and the ease of use with modern software and technology and all that, easy peasy to just record all the shows and pick the best ones, rather than have to go into the show going, this is the one we're recording live. Now, I gather it probably is still that case when you're going to think about releasing a video, that you aren't necessarily going to bring cameras and all the support crew for that for every show and record all of them and pick the best. But I guess to an extent, maybe that takes the pressure off a little bit because you no longer have to think too much about it. If it's just going to be an audio recording, you no longer have to think about, oh God, tonight's the show, we're recording for the album, I need to be on point.
Yeah, you don't really think about that anymore. It's so commonplace.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to doing everything we do in front of the cameras, and we try to record when we're making music as much as possible, as much as is feasible or worthwhile. I have several tours where I have multi-tracks from most dates. You know, I mean, who knows if I'll ever have the time to actually go and listen through them. But yeah, that's just the world we live in now. But it's no different than it was back in the day. If you look at old live albums, oftentimes a live album would be songs called across 4 or 5 different shows, and they would just all a 24 track tape machine around. You know, in those days they had semis, they had crew, they had teamsters, they had, you know, moving big gear was not a problem back then.
Right.
Today's world has sort of eliminated the need to do that unless you're, you know, at an arena level or higher, you know, a stadium level. But for the kind of gigs, you know, we do, you know, we've never needed that level of production. It'd be nice to have it, but we've managed pretty well, I think, for not having all of that, especially with lighting and so forth.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was kind of curious because I noted, you know, Neal Morse Band has, for the number of studio albums, a pretty high ratio of live albums as well. So I get to thinking, I wonder what propels that. Is it a matter of recognizing that you guys bring something special to the table when you're performing live? And it's interesting to hear from you that the record label actually requested it. So I guess that gives me the impression that not only do you guys sound great live, but these albums sell very well, because I can't imagine record companies asking for things that don't sell.
Well, you always hope that something you put out is going to sell well.
Yeah.
You know, that's certainly always what everybody's hoping happens. But truthfully, the amount of live albums that are sold, the numbers keep it from being huge.
Right.
We you know, we spend just enough and press just enough to fill, you know, the demand for it. The record label oftentimes probably doesn't feel that they sell enough to be, you know, to see the kind of numbers they want to see, especially now for Sony. You know, it's probably all a lot different for them as opposed to when they were independent and they could pretty much do it. But at the same time, you just hope that people are going to want to buy it and that it's something that it's worth buying. You know, this market's getting so saturated with everything from every direction these days. Back in the day, it was pretty focused and people were pretty focused in on it. There wasn't a lot of peripheral stuff to keep distracting them or to take their attention away. So you could do a live album and it was really a big deal. Frampton Comes Alive, Yes Songs, those albums really withstood, you know, Seconds Out. Those albums have withstood the test of time. And in many ways, they're the gateways for most of the bands. I know that I probably had Yes Songs and Seconds Out first before I had even any of the studio stuff.
Oh, no kidding. That's amazing.
So in this day and age, you get to that practice where every time you do a tour, you do an official release, and people come to expect that.
Yeah.
Come to expect it because you've set a precedence and created a pattern that you keep repeating. So maybe this was a good time to break it. You know, coming back from touring after the pandemic, it was kind of a tough tour. Attendances were lower than projected. So I don't know if that really has anything to do with the performance, because, you know, places like the Mark Salé where we recorded this, that was pretty average. You know, we saw the same numbers as we usually see. But there were news where it was noticeable that there was probably less attendance, and I get it. At that point, early 2002, you know, it was just starting to come back. So I venture to say next time around we will probably end up doing, full blown live DVD
Yeah,
production. So
very cool. Yeah, I have to imagine as well too that the thing I've heard repeatedly is, that coming back after the pandemic, a lot of bands were very much eager to get back out there, and a lot of tours happened at the same time, and there was a lot of competition with one another for an audience. And I think the classic example that comes to my mind was almost a year ago. I know it was in September, and there were literally, I think, on either one night or one weekend, 4 shows I wanted to see.
yeah,
And I could only see out of all of them one of them. and and I was so frustrating because they were all acts that I'd not been able to see before. And but here you go. It's end up kind of cannibalizing one another's audience availability in that sense. I hope that's starting to shift in a more
it
in a
certainly
more
looks,
was that
it certainly looks as though,
yeah
touring is coming back, and
yeah
audiences are, and people are less afraid to, to go and be there. And the threat of COVID shutting down your tour, which was huge,
right yeah
also something that's no longer, an issue for the most part. So
yeah.
a lot,
Thank
a
you for
lot of,
saving me from finishing that sentence because the word I wanted had escaped me.
well, yeah. Anyhow, yeah. So
Gotcha.
so basically, yeah, we put that album out. We've been that's been in the works for a while. Obviously,
Yeah.
uh, I think it was probably right around the first of the year that we started talking about they want a live album, and let's look at this one, this
Yeah.
show here. And so a good 6 months, I guess,
Yeah.
between we start talking about it and it actually comes out. It's been about 6 months. Most of during that time, I basically been writing, a solo album, and
Yeah.
I just released that. So, or I'm getting ready to release that. So,
Yeah. Tell me about that a little bit. I was digging into your previous works and getting an idea of what you had done, because I'll admit, as much as I try to be on top of everything, things slipped past me, and I was not aware you had done solo albums before. And compared to what I'm hearing on the first single that you've released, make make me real, make
uh-huh.
it real. Trapping to,
Make me,
without written in front of me, my brain was not allowing me to get to it. But make me real. It's a very different sound from your previous solo collections that I'm hearing. Talk about that a little bit.
well, this time I wanted to try something different on a solo record. My idea was to do sort of a retro singer-songwriter kind of vibe, at least for most of it,
Yeah.
mixed in with some other of what I typically do. Um, and I had several pieces laying around, and I still do. But I'm the greatest lyricist, so finding a singer-songwriter to work with to try to bring the songs alive. I'm more the guy that creates the sound. I'm not so much the songwriter. I can create the music. I can create an arrangement that'll support a song in a formula sort of way. And in a way, that's pretty much what I did with Make Me Real. But that was the only one that I actually was able to get a vocal, to get somebody to actually sit and write the lyrics and sing it.
Mm.
And I've been sort of, I've been seeing Simon's posts, and Simon Godfrey. I've been seeing his posts for a while, and he's got some great stuff. His bands like Shinedown and Tiny Fish, and
Yeah.
even his just I really resonated with me, and I thought, wow, I should hit him up and see if he's interested. And he seemed to be inspired, and came up with the idea fairly quickly. So it was he was able to make it happen. He's
Yeah.
very talented. I'm really grateful to have him on that song. Now, I also have to preface this by saying it's the only song on the album that's like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Gotcha. In that style, or that has vocals?
that has vocals for
Gotcha.
one thing, and it's a pretty straightforward hard rock kind of song, you know,
Yeah.
with a deep Purple kind of vibe or something.
Yeah.
But it's you know, my albums are just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
You know, I got the bluesy Jeff Beck kind of vibe thing going on. I got something that sounds like the Neal Morse Band, something that sounds a little bit like, you know, late '70s Genesis, something that sounds like maybe a little, well, I don't even know who to describe, but some experimental kind of stuff. I had
Right.
this guy, Paul Hansen. He plays the bassoon and he did some soloing on one song, and the guy just melts your brain. It's
Amazing.
insane. And I had a few sort of, you know, contemporary jazz type pieces as
Yeah.
well. So, you know, I kind of just, I
Yeah.
just kind of put it all on there. And it is a musical journey of sorts. The song order creates a nice arc for a full listening experience if you're going to go top to bottom.
Cool.
And it actually takes you someplace if you let it. And anyhow, yeah, I just wanted to do a little bit of everything. I was hoping to have more guests than what I did, but
Right.
for whatever reason, what I had was just enough. Is what I needed. And I don't know. It seemed to all just be there. I didn't really
Right.
feel like it was missing something. Um, you know. So yeah, it's done and mixed. I had Jerry Guidros do the mix, and that should, like I said, is coming out September 1st. And
First,
I
yep.
have a band which is Randy George Bass .bandcamp.com.
Nice.
Randy
Yeah.
George Bass, yeah, .bandcamp.com. So and I threw a few things that I still have up there. I have some hard copies of my second solo album, Action Reaction,
Right. Right.
CD, and CDs from the third Ajalon album, which was a band I had back in Seattle.
Hmm.
And I have a thumb drive from the Sweet Invention Project, which is a little EP that my wife and I put out back in 2020 as a sort of as a pandemic thing.
Yeah. 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 That
Otherwise,
was.
we'd probably still be working on songs and have, you know, try to go for a whole album. But
Yeah.
you know, the pandemic just got us feeling like, well, let's just put out an EP and
Yeah.
just get it out. People are
There,
looking for stuff, and so
there was that little bit of a silver lining, I think, for the pandemic in some ways, that it inspires some people to work on some things that maybe they had shelved for a while, maybe out of, you know, time constraints and such, or it inspired them because of what was going on. And the fortunate thing, again, this modern world we live in, that just like you can record a concert with a laptop, you can record, you know, instrument parts and vocals and things like that at home on a
right,
laptop or PC, and just email them to people and somebody can assemble them into, you know, a full-fledged song. It's kind of a nice thing to be able to do, and it gives, I think, a lot of added freedom to those who are trying to put things together. But I mean, you certainly seem to bring in a solid number of friends for this particular album here, a number of names that are well known, some that are not as well known, but you got a solid lineup of guest stars on there.
yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I have Neal Morse
Yeah.
doing some keyboard stuff. Eric Gillette did some guitar solos, and you know, it was a fun experience. And I kind of thought maybe I should keep writing and maybe make it a little longer, but I also realized that, you know, there's just a perfect length for an album sometimes,
Yeah.
and for some, well, this kind of album, I think it's at its perfect length. It's a good listen at 42 minutes, and some, you know, you could pack a lot on a
Yeah.
CD. We used to do that in the Neal Morse Band, 79 minutes, you know, on a CD. And even our keyboard player, who at the time wasn't our keyboard player, but when he became our keyboard player, he said, you know, the problem I had with those albums was I could never listen to them all the way through in one setting because they're just too long. You know, not like, you know, there were any longer than a movie, but nonetheless, it's funny how people treat music. But a lot of times it's on a drive. Maybe the drive was an hour, and he'd like to listen to an album top to bottom on his drive. But the album's 79 minutes, so and I think I get that. I get that. I think there's a point where you just like skip this song, or
Yeah.
three songs from the end and you're done. So I kept thinking about all that and just decided, yeah, I think we're at a length that seems good. So,
Yeah. And I mean, there's one thing I've heard regularly from talking to musicians is that there can be a real downside to trying to force something, to going outside of what feels natural in terms of composing, whether it's trying to hit a certain style or hit a certain feel, that at times, when they have pushed themselves to go, well, I got to try and do this, or I got to try and do that, it hasn't come out as well as they might have intended because it was forced. So in that same thing, because there's extra time to fill, don't necessarily feel like you need to fill it because you might regret it.
I think musicians in general need to feel like they're achieving their objectives.
Yeah.
I think what happens a lot of time though is they're not objective enough about what they're doing.
Right.
And like, I keep trying to make this song like this, and I keep trying to do this, and it just doesn't seem to be working. So, well, it doesn't want to be that kind of song. But you got to find what naturally drives you and let it happen. Because a lot of times I think that'll happen, and people say, oh, it sounds too much like this, or it sounds too much like that. And it's like, well, there's a reason why. And maybe it would be better if you just let it happen instead of trying to force it to be something different. The impetus of any song is going to be reflected. So it's kind of dumb to try to hide the reflection of that. It's kind of like having a flower that blooms, but you're hiding the middle of it, and it's like, okay, well, it's not so pretty, like a sunflower or something. It's like, it's just kind of, so you really want to be true to what you are as a musician. And sometimes that's hard for people to come to grips with the fact that they listen to so-and-so all their lives at a very young age and listen to this and that. And then they're surprised that they write stuff that sounds like that, musicians program themselves by the music they listen to. And I think that's an objectivity that you have to keep in mind when you go about writing music. Working with guys like Neal, a lot of times I hear something that is part of the repertoire that fed into my musical vocabulary, but he doesn't hear it that way, and he'll want to do it this way. And my perception of this way might be, I kind of don't like that as much. It's not quite the same thing. And a lot of times you have to learn to just do things the way that they want to be done, and relearn how to listen to it. If you write and you're always listening, but you're always hearing what you wanted and didn't get, you're always going to be frustrated with your own stuff. Instead of learning to like what it is you already do and learning to listen to what you did without hearing something that you feel isn't there that it should be.
Right.
I don't know if it makes sense, but
I think it does, and it's a perspective I've not heard from somebody before, and so it makes me wonder, to what degree everybody does struggle with that ability to hear their own work objectively, and or listen to somebody else that may have less of an emotional investment in it. It sounds like you're better able to distance yourself at times and take an objective look, or at least it's something you've worked on pretty hard.
I took it a little bit as a challenge when there was one time I was sitting in a Starbucks with Rick Wakeman, and we were just talking, and we kind of touched on a subject, and he said, you can never hear your own music for the first time. And that statement always stuck with me, because I totally get what he was saying, is that you can never have the experience in your own music of what somebody else experiences when they first hear it.
Yeah.
You can never have that. You'll never have that objectivity. And I think I've thought about that over the years a lot. And I think it's driven me to try to achieve more objectivity and to try to step outside myself and look at it. And I guess it's just kind of part of my personal journey in music. But yeah, that really inspired me when he said that, because I don't, like you said, I don't think a lot of people sit and think about that too hard. But I think it's something that can help you, you know, with a little bit more of a focused objectivity.
Right.
But that comes with having been disappointed enough times that you learn to let go of disappointment and appreciate what you had in the end.
Yeah.
And with Neal Morse Band stuff, there's been places I was disappointed that an idea that I had for it didn't make it. That happens, and that's, I don't take it personally. It's part of the process. That's just what happens in a collaboration. It happens to everybody. There are parts that by the time you get to the end, something you did just doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And you just have to let it go. But by the time you get to the end, you're like listening to the final mix, listening to what, okay, so this is going to be it. This is what everybody's going to hear. And this is what's etched in time forever. And learn to listen and appreciate it for what it is. Not, again, not looking at the, oh, I wished it was like that here. I wish it was like there. And over the years, it's funny how you'll go a long, long time without listening to stuff, especially in the catalog. It's like, wow, I haven't heard in 10 years. And then you do listen to it, and then all of a sudden you don't have any of that previous, you know, the stuff that clouds your judgment with a song. All of that's gone, and you're actually hearing it almost like you are hearing it for the first time, even though you know you're not. In a lot of ways, though, there's a freshness to it that is often surprising, because you're kind of, why did I ever want to do it the other way in with? You know, I don't even remember why I wanted to do that, or I'm glad we didn't, you know, that kind of thing. So
that's an interesting thought. And honestly, I think that's a thought that's I'm going to keep in my brain, the idea that you can never hear your own stuff for the first time. That's pretty damn profound. And I think in a similar way, sometimes it's surprising the reactions you might get from people on things that you created or done or have done. I put in the context of myself, I will joke around. One, I joke around a lot, and two, I joke about the fact that somewhere along the line I realized that jokes that that made me guffaw almost before I even said them oftentimes fell flat. And the things I thought were just kind of throwaway, comments have had people rolling on the floor. And at that point, I decided I'm just turning off the filter in my brain, because clearly it doesn't work well. And I can't predict what people are going to laugh at. So I'm just going to say whatever. And I guess the same experience must be had by musicians at times, where you write something that you think, this is amazing, this is the best thing I've ever written. And people go, yeah, it's all right. And then there are other things you may have written that, you didn't think too much of at the time, and people just absolutely fell over themselves loving it and praising it. And I guess I'm kind of curious, when you look back, can you remember occasions on particular songs where that happened, where you were just absolutely shocked at how much people loved something that you didn't feel was your best work?
Oh, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It happens on tours, because you'll come off stage and you think, oh, that was an awful show. Oh man, it didn't seem like this was as tight as last night, or in the grand scope of all your shows. And you're thinking, you remember that one just not feeling it. It didn't quite lock into the pocket. And then somebody will come up, it was the best show I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I have found, we'll go back and listen. Okay, go back and listen to the show and see if it was as bad as I thought it was. And I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, well, this sounds pretty good. I mean, this isn't as bad as I remember. I think in your mind, a few mistakes or just falling out of, here and there can just throw you off enough that you just feel that way the rest of the night, despite the fact that you're still really on.
Right.
But something can sort of take your center, take you off center. I want to say at center, because when you're in that pocket and everything's clicking the way it should, and you're hitting the notes, and everybody's just there, and that's what makes those, the performance of you hear on the CD. But as a musician, that's because you stay centered in the pocket of the song and in the context and in the groove of the song, and you're able to feel it and you take it
Right.
all through and really sell. And if something throws you off, sometimes it's hard to get recentered and feel like you're recentered. It just it's tough sometimes, and it's not always even you. It could be somebody else's unfortunate event. Mike, I remember one show we were doing, and Mike put his foot, his kick drum head right through the head. He went, put a hole in the head. Oops. And so you got to stop. It breaks your momentum. You got to stop, replace the head, and there was only one other head in the building. Put it on and play a little more, and all of a sudden he stops and he's like, I did it again.
Oh my gosh.
I think the pads that are supposed to be on there, for whatever reason, we didn't have any. It was one of those travel gigs where we had come in from somewhere else and put all the stuff together. I'm not sure why everything wasn't there, but that's just the kind of thing that can just throw you off. And the rest of that show, I just really didn't feel it. Now, other people said it was great, but I just, something like that just gets you a little thrown off. It breaks your momentum. It happens, though. You just have to take it with a grain of salt. We had this PA shut down in Germany. A PA is where everything's going through a stage box out to the board through a Cat5 cable and coming back through in-ear monitors. So it's an enclosed system that you take your stereo feed to front of house, but the system we travel with and play through comes with us. It's not a house system. We just use the house speakers. And about 20 minutes before the show, it died. It just totally went down. And they messed with it, couldn't get it back up. And then they just decided, well, plan B, start shifting everything to the house mixer and running lines and getting out wedge monitors. And the show started way late. We ended up cutting almost half the show.
Oh, no.
They were very gracious and loved it. A lot of them, I thought that was my favorite show of all the ones I saw. Why? Well, we felt we got to see something very special, and it'd be like, wow, and they did. Neal had to come out and entertain people for a while on acoustic guitar, Neal and Mike, and we all kind of did stuff. So stuff like that can really mess you up when you're trying to deliver a great show.
Yeah. Well, there's a certain, I guess, level of rhythm and repetition that comes with performing, that when you're used to things going smoothly, it's almost strictly, like working out of habit, like that. It's not a matter of you have to think as hard. And you're working off of a certain level of muscle and mental reflex. And I suppose once that gets seriously disrupted, now all of a sudden, you've got to start thinking harder than you normally do. And that in and of itself trips you up. Although it sounds like at certain times you've experienced the matter of your mind was off, but everything else was working normally and nobody else noticed what you noticed, which is, I guess, to a certain extent, a tribute to the subjectivity of our human experience, that fortunately we're not as bad as we think we are, even when, like we think everybody else can see it.
Well, the length and breadth of the music we play, your focus always has to be thinking of, one step ahead. What's the next thing I need to do? And your mind can drift, especially if you're playing repetition. Your mind will drift and you forget how many times you are through it and when you're supposed to come out of it, or you just ultimately you miss something if you're not continually focused on, what's coming next, and that's critical, and it takes a lot of the it takes a lot out of you to do that for 2 hours. So, but that's what it's all about, though. You condition yourself to do that. That's what you rehearse and aspire to as a musician.
Yeah.
To be able to deliver the performance that you want to deliver.
Yeah.
So.
And it's amazing because you're talking about the level of complexity and the extensive compositions, the long songs that you're going to be playing as part of the Neal Morse Band. That's that takes a lot. That does, I imagine, take a ton of mental focus. At the same time, it makes me wonder at times, how often does somebody slip something in that was an error that the rest of us don't pick up on because we're not that in tune with it. Maybe it gives you a little bit of margin for error that you can kind of go off a little bit for a moment there, realize, oops, did a boner, and then just continue on, and everybody else goes, yeah, that's cool, we can do that. That's that level of professionalism, I think, that
if somebody rails and it's not going to stop the train, maybe they just missed a beat,
right?
You can catch it and just adjust to it. Just everybody just sort of adjusts to it. And that's a good skill to be able to develop. It takes playing together for a while to do that. And a lot of this stuff you can't really learn unless you're in front of an audience. You've got to learn it in the shows. You can rehearse it all you want, but in the show you don't get to stop and try it again.
And rehearsal is repeating how it's supposed to go. It's not practicing how it's not supposed to go, and you're supposed to come back from that. That's the upside of playing live, because that's where the experience happens.
It's all about the delivery, staying focused and listening to each other, and if you do the first few shows, you're always going to have bugs, and you're always going to be working out the kinks. But by 6th, 7th, 8th shows, 9th, 10th, you're all of a sudden, it's there. You're not thinking about it anymore. You just can go out, play the music, and have fun. For the tour.
That's the best
I've
way.
gotten to, I play through the show in my sleep, because we'd done enough shows to where I didn't have to really think too hard about what was next. It just wind it up and let it go.
And that's an amazing thing to me. I am one who admires musicians. I am not one who ever really was a musician. And at times, hey, could I do it all over again? Maybe what I try to be, sure. But meanwhile, I get to watch you guys do your work on stage and get to admire what happens up there. And hey, if errors are made and I'm not aware, doesn't matter to me. And I know you guys are professional enough to recover from all of it, as most are, I would imagine, if they're on stage performing in front of a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, it's just what you learn when you're out there. This stuff happens along the way, and over the years, you learn to just deal with it quickly and efficiently, and maybe people won't even realize anything went wrong, and most of the time they don't. They really don't. So
excellent.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Well, I appreciate your time with me this afternoon. I really thank you for your generosity and taking the time to speak with me. I know that there are all kinds of things you could be doing, but you took a little time out of the day with me, and that's, again, much appreciated.
Oh, no problem. Happy to do it.
Yep. So we got An Evening of Innocence and Danger live in Hamburg. That's out now. Beyond Words, that's coming out September 1st. That's your solo project. And other than that, I guess you've come off the tour for the time being, and I think you just finished Morse Fest, right?
No.
Is that coming up still?
In August, yes.
August, okay. Got my dates mixed up there.
In that rehearsal mode where I basically am playing through the shows.
Right. Excellent.
Doing
all right.
what I have to do, but I can stop. I can still stop and do it again.
There you go. Excellent. So good. That's coming up. See, I make mistakes like that so you can correct me and help promote the show on your own. I do that on purpose. All right, sir. Well, I thank you very much. Take care. I wish you the best of success with all of it. I hope it goes really, really well for you, and enjoy Morse Fest. I hope it's a great time.
Great. Thank you so much.
And a big thank you to Randy George for joining me again. Very much appreciated, sir. Thank you. Great talking to you. His new album, Beyond Words, is due out September 1st. And you can pre-order that on his Bandcamp page. Go check him out there. He's got other stuff as well, because this is his third album. You may not have known that. So anyway, go to Bandcamp, find Randy George, pre-order the new album, Beyond Words. In addition, the Neal Morse Band, their new live album, An Evening of Innocence and Danger, live in Hamburg, is out now. You can go check it out at your favorite streaming platform, or better yet, go buy it. Go buy it. Help support the band. Meanwhile, follow me on the social medias. Follow Bleeding Edge, Facebook, Instagram, X, or Twitter, or whatever the hell it's called at this point in time. Better yet, just go try Threads instead. Meanwhile, here, hit the like button, please, if you could. Subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can keep up with future interviews. And if you want, you got some time, you want to check out my backlog of previous interviews going back the past 2 years, you can find those anywhere on your favorite podcasting platform. So thank you very much. And once again, this is Super Dave signing off.